Imagine being a parent, nurturing your child, and watching them grow up. You send them to school, hoping they'll learn and have a bright future. But then tragedy strikes. Schools are common places for bullying, even outside school grounds. How insane is it when bullying happens right inside the school and no one intervenes until it's too late? It's sad that in most cases, the victims don't get timely help. Remember the Korean drama, The Glory, where a girl was tortured with a hot iron hair curler by her classmates? It's shocking to think these aren't just isolated incidents. Today we're going to talk about one of the most gruesome bullying cases in Malaysia, where the perpetrators used a similar method of burning the victim, just like in The Glory. Today, let's talk about the Zulfarhan Osman bullying case. It's not that Hawa Osman has not come to terms with the death of her son. She has. But she cannot accept the way he was tortured. These were the words of Hawa Osman, speaking about her late son, Zulfarhan Osman Zulkarnain, who was brutally murdered by 6 of his fellow cadet mates at University Pertahanan Nasional Malaysia, UPNM, over 7 years ago. Zulfarhan was subjected to 90 burn marks, a horrific act of bullying that ended his life and shattered his family. Hawa, now 60, shared her ongoing grief and the deep scars left by the tragedy. She said she cries every night and hopes the bullies experience the pain her late son endured. Zulfarhan Osman is the name that comes to mind in Malaysia when talking about bullying cases, due to the sheer brutality and the minimal punishment the perpetrators received in the eyes of the victim's family and the public. The story began with the dreams of a young boy, Zulfarhan Osman Zulkarnain, who wanted to become a Navy officer. He was a bright young boy, beloved by his family and those around him. Mrs. Hawa clearly remembered the day she sent Zulfarhan to university. Her son told her to look at his belongings if she ever missed him. This shows that he deeply cherished his family just as they loved him, a normal boy with a big and respectable dream. To help their boy achieve his dream, his parents sent him to the National Defense University of Malaysia, where he enrolled in electrical engineering classes. The boy was smart, excelling in all of his studies. However, enrolling there meant living in a campus dorm. With a mix of swelling emotions and encouragement, Zulfarnain and Hawa let their son go, hoping he'd become a great man one day. Little did they know that those hopes and dreams would be shattered by something so unimaginable. On May 21st, 2017, a group of students approached Zulfarhan, asking him strange questions. They accused him of stealing Muhammad Akmal's laptop, which Zulfarhan denied. Despite his denial, the group insisted he was the thief. It's unclear why they believed this, but they began pushing and punching the 21-year-old. They dragged him to his dorm room, and what followed was horrifying. From 2:30 a.m. to 5:30 a.m., the students tortured Zulfarhan. They took turns pressing and dragging a hot steam iron on his skin, beating him with plastic pipes, hoses, and hangers. All this was done to extract a confession about the laptop. The torture didn't end that day. The next morning, they left Zulfarhan in his room, telling everyone who asked that he was sick. After their classes and training, they returned to his room to continue the abuse, using the steam iron and other items on his existing burns, even on his private parts. Despite their brutal actions, they had the audacity to care for his wounds. 6 days after the initial attack on May 27th, they took him to a private clinic. The doctors, believing his injuries were due to military training, gave him some medicine and sent him back to his abusers. Thinking his condition was worsening, they brought him to the clinic again on May 31st. Zulfarhan couldn't endure the ongoing torture. On the early morning of June 1st, a student named Muhammad Nazrin was asked by Muhammad Azamuddin to check on Zulfarhan, who wasn't moving. When Nazrin said he couldn't perform CPR, they called an ambulance. Zulfarhan was taken to Serdang Hospital, but sadly he was pronounced dead shortly after arriving. When Zulfarhan's parents received the heartbreaking phone call at around 11:30, their world shattered. They cried and immediately left their home in Johor, traveling 300 kilometers to Serdang Hospital in Kajang Selangor. Upon arriving at 3 a.m., they were not allowed to see his body until 9 a.m. It was odd that they were initially only permitted to see his face, not his body. It was then they discovered the extent of his burns, boils, and wounds. Sensing something was wrong, his father filed a report for investigation. After all, 90% of Zulfarhan's body was covered in burns and boils. Many of his injuries were so severe that it would have been difficult to save his life even with treatment. An investigation was launched and the police began questioning the students. This had happened right under the campus's nose. How could no one have known anything about this? As the investigation unfolded, it was revealed that there were many missed opportunities to save Zulfarhan's life. A witness claimed to have known about the torture and wrote an anonymous letter to the university's upper management, hoping they would intervene. However, the letter was exposed on WhatsApp by the recipient, prompting the perpetrators to move Zulfarhan to another location to hide him. Additionally, the medical professionals who treated Zulfarhan missed critical signs. It was odd that the doctor believed Zulfarhan had suffered from explosive burns. Most of his body was burned, but not his neck, face, or any exposed areas visible to the eye. The police identified 6 main suspects. 5 were responsible for torturing Zulfarhan, while 1 was accused of abetting the crime. All were only 22 years old at the time. 5 were charged with murder under Section 302 of the Penal Code, which mandates the death penalty if convicted. 1 was charged with abetting under Section 109 of the same code, which carries the same penalty. All defendants pleaded not guilty at the High Court to charges of murder and intentionally causing harm. However, the prosecution provided evidence that all the accused, following their friends' directions, took turns pressing a steam iron onto Zulfarhan's body, sparing only his face and the tops of his hands. This caused 90 burns, leading to his death. Deputy Public Prosecutor K. Mangai stated that they would have known these injuries could be fatal, making it hard to claim they had no intent to kill. The meticulous placement of the burns suggested an attempt to hide the marks. The accused claimed to love Zulfarhan, suggesting that if they didn't, they might have inflicted burns on his face and caused even more harm. But the court could not find sufficient evidence of intent to murder, despite the prosecution's demands. Ultimately, the court reached a verdict. On November 2nd, 2021, the Supreme Court sentenced the 6 former students of the Malaysian National Defense University to 18 years in prison. They were found guilty of causing the death of C cadet employee Zulfarhan Osman Zulkarnain without intent to murder. Unfortunately, the sentence was calculated from the day of their arrest, June 1st, 2017, effectively reducing it by about 4 years. However, these 6 were not the only ones involved. 12 others were also punished for participating in the torture of Zulfarhan. These individuals were sentenced to 3 years in prison and found guilty under Criminal Code Section 330 regarding torture. The defendants were given the opportunity to appeal, which they did. Their defense lawyers said the court should consider the fact that the accused deserve a second chance. This light punishment led many to believe they got away with a mere slap on the wrist. In response, the prosecution submitted their own appeal against the court's decision, arguing that the perpetrators deserved harsher punishment. At the appeal hearing on May 15, 2024, they sought to reinstate the original murder charges and push for the death penalty, citing the severity of Zulfarhan's injuries. The prosecution's stance was clear. The wounds inflicted were too severe, and the perpetrators could not claim ignorance of their actions. The Court of Appeal has scheduled July 23rd to deliver the verdict on the appeal. Despite the high-profile nature of the Zulfarhan Osman case and the discussions it sparked against bullying, it did not lead to significant changes in reality. Just a few days later, on June 16th, another teenager died due to severe bullying. Naveen, only 19 years old, went out to buy burgers with his best friend Praveen. They were confronted by Naveen's long-term bullies. The confrontation escalated into violence. They were assaulted and beaten with helmets by 5 bullies. Praveen, outnumbered, ran away to seek help. Meanwhile, Naveen was taken to a secluded area where he was sodomized and further beaten. His brain-dead body was later dumped in a field. He was pronounced dead 2 days later at Penang Hospital. Both the Zulfarhan and Naveen cases show a disturbing commonality: the indifference of witnesses. In Naveen's case, a burger stand employee witnessed the beating but did not intervene, thinking it looked serious. Had he stepped in, Naveen's life might have been saved. In the Zulfarhan case, many people could have intervened to stop the bullying. The upper management of the National Defense University of Malaysia could have acted on the letter they received. The doctor could have recognized that Zulfarhan's burns were not from an explosion. However, due to negligence and indifference, no one took the necessary steps to help. Now, all that remains are apologies and rest in peace messages, which do little to heal the pain. He was buried in Johor, attended by his fellow Navy mates, friends, and family. Tears and prayers filled the air as they mourned the loss of an innocent boy who fell victim to a false accusation. No one can truly imagine the pain his parents felt as they buried their son, seeking justice that remains elusive. Hawa, a mother of 4, said that since her son's murder, she and her husband have been traumatized and avoid using an iron to press clothes, as it reminds her of Zulfarhan's suffering caused by the object. His father shared that 2 weeks after his son's death, he dreamt of his son returning in his Navy uniform. In the dream, he welcomed his son and took him for a walk around Johor Bahru. Zulfarhan told him that he wasn't dead and was still there. Every time he remembers that dream, he cries because Zulfarhan was a good son. He accepts his son's death, but cannot comprehend the suffering his son went through. He hopes that bullying cases are addressed before more lives are lost. The Zulfarhan Osman case is just one of many where bullying turns deadly around the world. This case not only shows how students can get out of hand when exposed to this toxic culture, but also makes us think about the many tragedies that could have been prevented if people hadn't turned a blind eye. Let us hope that the souls of these victims can rest in peace and that their families find the closure they desperately need. It's a call to action for all of us to ensure such tragedies never happen again. That's all for today. Thanks for watching.